Hey everyone, welcome to a new season of One Lone Cat Podcast, where the role of Blackcatloner will be played by Pedro Pascal. Boo! And now we're truly back. Once again, welcome back to One Lone Cat Podcast. I'm your real host, Blackcatloner, and today's episode is a bit of a personal one. Since the last original episode was recorded last year, I really should start off by saying, welcome to 2025. It's a new month, a new chapter, and as the title says, a brand new day. But first, a little housekeeping. First up, since there has been some changes to Spotify, I had to reorganize the episode order for this podcast, which means now the first two episodes of this podcast were the first two episodes of my very short-lived movie review podcast, Movies to Go. That means episode 1 of One Lone Cat Podcast was my review of Falling Down. Episode 2 was my review of Superman 3, and episode 3 is actually the official debut episode of One Lone Cat Podcast, the one where I talk about superheroes, the eclipse, and an earthquake. In the interim, I also added all 3 episodes of Tales of the Black Cat to the continuity. The first episode of Tales of the Black Cat, Social Media Stranger, which is my origin story, is now episode 10. My review of The Wrath of Khan, originally episode 3 of Tales, is now episode 11 of this podcast. And the second episode of Tales, where I talk about my struggles with diabetes and how I discovered VTubers, is episode 12 of this podcast. And that means that this episode is episode 13 of One Lone Cat Podcast. It's also the first episode of season 2 of One Lone Cat Podcast. So now that we're all caught up, grab a drink, settle in, and let's take a little trip down memory lane, not to mention a few digital rabbit holes, because today I want to talk about a couple parts of my life that somehow came together in a way I never saw coming. VTuber clipping, and a book which I started writing way back in high school that I decided to revisit. But first, a word from an 80s commercial that I riffed on earlier this year. I sing like a fucking simp. Please take that last line out of context. Sweet dreams you can't resist. But we're sure gonna try. Let's start this off on a brighter note. My YouTube channel. Last year was incredible in terms of growth. When I started, I had no idea where this journey would take me, but now looking back, I can see how much progress I've made. The numbers went up, engagement increased, and I really started finding my place in the content creation world. And let's start with the now. You ever just stumble onto something online that grabs your attention and doesn't let go? Well, that was me the first time I saw Filian.
I lost a minute and a half of my life being confused on why the frick the video about me didn't have me, and then this reveal, I'm a Filipino boy.
Today we're doing it. You laugh, you lose, and we have.
I don't sound like that. I don't even talk like that.
As you know, my introduction to the VTuber world was Project Melody in 2020, which is how I first saw Filian due to her frequent collabs with Melody. If you know, you know. She's this chaotic ball of energy, flipping around, cracking jokes, and just being completely unpredictable. One night, I clipped a moment from one of her streams just for fun, and I posted it. Next thing you know, people were reacting, laughing, sharing, and something clicked. I wasn't just clipping content, I was preserving moments. Not to mention bringing more people to watch her streams, which is the reason why VTuber Clippers exist, to help VTubers find audiences. Tiny sparks of joy in a big internet sky. That plus the fact that Filian put forth an incentive that she will pay Clippers to clip them. And that, my friends, is how I kind of fell sideways into being a VTuber Clipper. Especially for Filian, who's kind of become my creative muse in the weirdest and most awesome way possible. And here's the thing. Filian isn't the only VTuber I've clipped. I've clipped Project Melody a couple of times.
Let's see, Blackcatloner, Kiro Neko? Loner, I don't know. Kiro Neko Hikikomori. I'm too much.
In addition, I also clipped Iron Mouse a couple of times, like this clip from Sea-Dog VA's recent Cyclothon 4.
Be safe, Colin.
I do not go outside.
Good cycling though so far.
Smash this.
The wind's with us. Hard to complain. The wind in his... Oh, shit.
I'll tell you the temperature in my room, good.
Well, thankfully that's the second car we've seen on this road. No pollution. Just love and bicycles.
Fish in another car.
Oh, God.
Whoa.
Not to mention the time I gave Waifu Baby the pacifier when I was in her chat.
Her profile picture to Sora. It needs to be me and Sora. Just tell me to shut up, why don't you, Black Cat? Just tell me to shut up. Look in my eyes and say, shut up, bitch.
So yeah, I'm pretty much making a name for myself in the VTuber community as a clipper, even though I'm only exclusive to one VTuber in particular. But then there's this other part of me. The one that remembers a simpler time. 1997, Rock City. The tail end of high school, and the world felt like it was about to open up. Back then, I was just this teenager with a spiral notebook and a head full of stories. I wrote a book, well, kind of a book, more like a journal. A messy, heartfelt, angsty thing about growing up in an upstate New York high school in the mid-90s. So this book I'm working on, Where Were You in 97, is not just a story, it's a journal. A time capsule. I'm writing this as though I'm living through my last 2 years of high school all over again, day by day, memory by memory. But here's the twist. I'm writing it not as teenage me, but as me now, looking back and narrating it like I'm flipping through an old diary I never quite finished. And since a good majority of it was actually the novel I wrote in high school but never published, and all exclusively focused on my junior year of high school. But despite it being fiction, you could say it's autobiographical. Each chapter is an entry. June 1st, 1997. Graduation day, last summer at Rock City High. Some of it is drawn from real moments, the school halls, the TV shows we couldn't miss, the soundtrack of mid-90s alt-rock and pop music blasting from someone's Walkman. I also added some real-life moments, such as my trip to Puerto Rico, managing the girls' basketball team, and winning my high school lip-sync competition. And some of it, it's fiction inspired by memory. Characters loosely based on people I knew, conversations I wish I had, and feelings that honestly I didn't know how to express back then. But the cool part? Writing it this way lets me process it all now, nearly 30 years later. Yeah, I'm old, what are you gonna do? With a bit more clarity, a little more wisdom, and a whole lot of nostalgia. There's something healing about it too. Like I'm finally giving that teenage version of me a voice. Not the snarky one we all used to hide our insecurities, but the real one. The confused, hopeful, anxious, dreaming kid who just wanted to find his place in a town that felt too small and a world that felt too big. Sometimes I sit down to write and it's like opening a door. I can smell the old cafeteria pizza, I can hear the lockers slam and the PA system crackling to life. I remember what it felt like to count down the days until graduation, and at the same time feel totally unsure what would come after. Writing it as a journal makes it feel intimate, honest. It's like I'm leaving little timestamp letters to myself and maybe to anyone else out there who remembers what it was like to be caught between childhood and adulthood in a pre-internet world. And you know what's funny? In some ways, writing this book feels a lot more like clipping VTuber moments, just slower, more personal. But the goal is the same. Capture a moment, preserve it, share it, or in my case, rewrite history. And maybe, just maybe, it means something to someone else too. And now, I've decided to bring it back. Rewriting it from the ground up as Where Were You in '97? But this time I'm telling it like a journal. Like I'm reliving those final 2 years before graduation through the eyes of someone who's been there, done that, and somehow came out the other side. It's funny, isn't it? Whenever I'm clipping a VTuber moment or writing about my life in high school during the mid-90s, it's all about capturing the moment, the emotion, the chaos, the heart. That's what I've always loved doing. And of course, my high school years aren't the only thing I'm writing about. I still have the One Lone Cat short story book I have in development, and I'm working on a novel featuring my private investigator character, Max Malone, and I'll have more on all those projects coming soon. By the way, I'm actually aiming to release Where Were You in '97 sometime this year. And it's kind of funny that I'm bringing up me writing about my high school life, a fictional account, but here's the thing of note. This week actually marks 28 years since I graduated from high school. Wow, how about coincidence? Getting back to Filian for one more second. I just wanted to share quickly that I did sort of make an appearance on her stream recently. But first, the catalyst for said appearance.
Can I be a black cat girl?
Yeah. Wow, that's
Toxic Lolita.
bad luck. That's bad luck, though. You wouldn't be allowed to come near me.
Dang! Filiana, that sounds kind of racist.
That's not right. No, it's a black cat. It's the meme. It's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like walking underneath the ladder. It's just bad luck, okay? Like, come on, man.
Which of course led to me sharing my debunking black cat myths video on her Discord.
This is you regard your comments on black cats being bad luck.
And black cats are considered mysterious.
Yeah?
I know what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Black cats are associated with witches and bad luck.
Yeah!
For one thing, racist. Also,
Whenever, Pluggy Pluggy. It's not racist because your hair is black, not your skin.
black cats have been known to represent good luck to people in some cultures, and they're also very loyal.
Whenever, Pluggy Pluggy.
But enough about...
But enough about me. Alright, whatever, man.
So in the end, you could say, she fricked around and found out. What can I say? My hoodie changes color. And it's time for another movie review. Since we are at the dawn of a brand new Superman movie coming out in theaters next week, let's talk a little bit about the Man of Steel. For generations, people have followed this strange visitor from another planet with power far beyond those of mortal men throughout countless comic books, movies, TV shows, cartoons, and so on. If not for Superman, there would be no Batman, there'd be no Spider-Man, there'd be no Iron Man, no X-Men, no Avengers, no Wonder Woman. I could go on. He may not be the most popular superhero of all time, at least not now, but in all fairness, he was the first superhero ever. And that also applies to the comic book movie genre. The modern comic book movies started with the first Superman movie back in 1978. So if not for the success of the first two Superman movies, we wouldn't have the other successful comic book movies. Now, what's my connection to Superman? I mean, how do I really feel about Superman? Well, as far as the comics go, I actually thought the comics were kind of boring. A lot of people seem to think that way primarily because they're unable to relate to him. I mean, how can you relate to a superhero that is perceived to be almost godlike? This is basically why more people can relate to heroes like Batman, who is actually human with no powers, except for being rich, and Spider-Man, who faces real-world problems while battling supervillains, and he does have powers. The truth is, I never really got into Superman much outside of the movies and TV. I didn't see the first Superman movie in theaters, partly because I was about 10 months old at the time, but when I finally did, I was completely blown away by how good it was. Same thing with Superman 2. I was still kind of young to see that, even though by the time Superman 2 came out, I did go to the movies. And guess what? Superman's 1 and 2 still hold up to this day, which is why I will not do a review of the first two movies. To date, I have only seen two Superman movies in theaters, Superman 3 and Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice in 2016. And I established that last time Superman 3 was not as bad as people say it is. I mean, it's bashed out the wazoo, primarily because of the Richard Pryor and comedic moments and all that stuff. Batman vs. Superman, on the other hand, really pissed me off. The only thing that kept that movie from being a total disaster was basically Batfleck and Wonder Woman. And since I talked about Superman 3 last time, let's move on with the story that happened in between Superman 3 and the movie we're reviewing today. After the critical failure of Superman 3, no one wanted to do another Superman movie, and the Salkinds went on to do the spin-off movie Supergirl. Remember, Supergirl was originally supposed to appear in the original story for Superman 3, but was dropped because, well, Richard Pryor. But anyway, Supergirl ended up bombing horribly, and with that, the Salkinds decided to relinquish their hold on the Superman franchise. Enter Menanam Golan and Yoran Globus and the Cannon Group. Remember all those schlocky 80s action movies you saw as a kid? Chances are a good chunk of them were distributed by this organization. You may also recall that not many of those movies were box office hits, with the exception of Sylvester Stallone's Cobra, which wound up being the most successful film Golan and Globus ever produced. However, it wasn't enough to keep the studio from going bankrupt at the time. So they decided that maybe producing a Superman movie would save their studio. And so they attempted to bring back the late Christopher Reeve, who by then had decided to move on from Superman to other things. So Golan and Globus offered Reeve an offer he could not refuse. If he returned as Superman in Superman 4, then the Cannon Group would not only give Reeve creative control over the story for Superman 4, but they would also produce a pet project that Reeve was doing at the time. It was a little movie called Street Smart, which in the end was marketed horribly and bombed badly at the box office, but it fared much better with the critics than Superman 4 did. Hey, that's what happens when you get Morgan Freeman as your co-star in that movie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're supposed to be talking about Superman. Well, Reeve agreed to the deal, and so Reeve decided that the Man of Steel should tackle a real-world issue. And what better issue for him to tackle than the Cold War? Even though by 1987 the Cold War was pretty much over, thanks Rocky Balboa, the main dilemma here is, should Superman play God and disarm the world as far as nuclear weapons go? And this should result in a better movie than the last Superman movie, right? Nope. This one was much, much worse. It grossed a disgraceful $15 million at the box office, which is not even a third of what the last movie did. And it currently holds a 14% critics rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And to this day, it's still considered one of the worst comic book movies of all time. Well, I've said enough, because I have a whole lot of territory to cover with this one. So let's rip into the movie that not only killed the Superman franchise, but almost killed the idea of the comic book movie subgenre until it was resurrected by Batman '89. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. The movie begins with the opening credits back to flying at the screen, except the credits take place against the backdrop of the Earth, and it looks like it was edited by an amateur using Windows Movie Maker. Ah, the joy of budget cuts. After that exhilarating new title sequence featuring Alexander Courage's rendering of the famous John Williams Superman theme. By the way, if the name Alexander Courage sounds familiar, it's because he composed music for a little TV show called Star Trek, the original series. But anyway, after the title sequence, we see a Russian spacecraft get struck by a satellite, therefore causing it to careen out of control and send one of its astronauts floating off into space. Well, at least until Superman shows up in a really bad visual effects shot. Get used to that visual effects shot, by the way. You'll be seeing that same crappy visual effects shot of Superman flying at the screen over and over and over again. Again, budget cuts. Time for backstory. As I mentioned before, the Cannon Group had been in bankruptcy for years prior to the time of this movie, and they have had a reputation for stealing budgets from other movies to finance other projects that they're developing at the time. And also at the time, the Cannon Group had the rights to Marvel's superhero line, and they were planning to produce a Spider-Man movie. And they needed a lot of money to make that film work. So Warner Brothers gave them X amount of money, and they managed to distribute it among two major movies that they were planning for the release in summer of 1987. This film and Masters of the Universe. The original budget for Superman 4 was $36 million, which would have put it on par with the other three movies, which were made for close to $40 million apiece, which in those days was the equivalent to the 150, 200 million blockbusters that you see nowadays. But anyway, the budget for Superman 4 was slashed down to $17 million, which means that a majority of the visual effects crews that worked on the other three films, and they were signed on to do this film, they ended up quitting in protest, hence the bad visual effects. But the visual effects weren't the only thing in this movie that suffered from budget cuts. The story itself had to be trimmed down repeatedly. In fact, the original running time for this movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes. As a result of the budget cuts, 45 minutes was cut from this movie, bringing its final running time down to 90 minutes exactly. And from what I was told, none of the scenes that were deleted went anywheres anyways. So whether or not any of the cut scenes would have helped improve the movie remains a debate to this day. But at least you can get the DVD in order to see them so you can judge for yourself. Plus you can also watch some of those deleted scenes on YouTube. But anyway, back to the movie. After Superman saves the Russian astronauts, he returns to the farm he grew up on in Smallville, Kansas, where he finds a crystal hidden in the ship that brought him to Earth as a baby in the first movie, and it'll come back to play a key role later on. However, the rest of the Smallville scenes were pointless. Well, Clark's basically there to sell the family farm, but he wants a real farmer because the developer that's helping him sell the farm wants to turn it into another shopping center. Well, at least it shows Clark's heart is in the right place, and he still believes in old school Americana. And then next we cut to Lex Luthor, played once again by the recently deceased Gene Hackman, who wound up on a chain gang after we last saw him in Superman 2. Anyway, he escapes with the help of his dim-witted nephew, Lenny, played by John Cryer, who at the time was capitalizing off his success as professional friend zone guy Ducky in the teen comedy Pretty in Pink. And together they hatch another plot to destroy Superman and, you guessed it, take over the world.
Of course!
Meanwhile, Clark returns to Metropolis with a slight detour to save a train conductor from a heart attack, only to find out that the Daily Planet had been taken over by a Rupert Murdoch wannabe, who proceeds to turn the paper into a standard fake news paper and make his hot daughter Lacey the editor-in-chief. Lacey is played by Mariel Hemingway, the granddaughter of legendary author Ernest Hemingway, and she's had a string of successful movies prior to this. Personality-wise, her character is the prototype of Kim Kardashian, and basically every society girl that's been in the media for the last 20 years. And surprise, surprise, she's got the hots for Clark, the oldest living Boy Scout, as Lois Lane refers to him. Clark is obviously not interested, but then again, who can blame him? After all, he's only been with one woman his whole life. And if you don't believe that, you haven't seen Superman 2. And also, the fling with the blonde bimbo in Superman 3 doesn't count, because he wasn't quite himself, thanks to that nicotine-laced kryptonite. So it's understandable that he doesn't really want to go to a place where practically everyone's been before, if you catch my meaning. However, before the whole Clark-Lacey thing can play out, the main story starts to kick in. Therefore, giving Clark his dilemma about disarming the world, because the whole arms race, where both the US and Soviet Russia each pledged to strive to be second to none in the nuclear arms race, which means whoever has the most nukes is the most powerful. Now, when he landed on Earth, Superman was forced to adhere to a non-interference policy in terms of the natural order of things here on Earth, kind of like Star Trek's Prime Directive. And it was also an act that he boldly went against in the first movie when he reversed the orbit of the Earth to undo the earthquake damage and resuscitate Lois after she dies. So what does Supes do after a bit of soul-searching that includes a pointless and visual effects challenged flight around the world with Lois that kind of rips off the first movie? He goes to the United Nations and makes a little speech where he says, "Even though I am not of your world, the Earth is my home too. And I can't stand by and watch it get destroyed, so I'm gonna get rid of all your nukes." And the weird thing is, everyone applauds, which is unrealistic. The normal response would go something like this: "Ugh! Superman, you're such a dick! You're not gonna take my nukes! I'm gonna keep them, I'm gonna blow stuff up because it's fun!" Meanwhile, cut back to Lex Luthor, because like it or not, he's in this movie too. After getting out of jail and hearing about Superman's goodwill mission to destroy all nukes, he breaks into a museum and steals a lock of Superman's hair that he has on display, propping up a 1,000-pound weight using a pair of garden shears. Logic! This movie sucks at it! The reason why old Lex is stealing a lock of Superman's hair is because he wants to create a clone that is even more powerful than the Man of Steel himself. Another interlude. When this story was first conceived, Lex created two versions of the being that would come to be known as Nuclear Man. The Nuclear Man that made it into the final cut of this movie was actually the second Nuclear Man. Scenes featuring the first Nuclear Man were among the 45 minutes that were cut from this movie. It was probably a good thing they did that, because the first Nuclear Man looked like a horribly deformed giant baby who fought Superman while making bell and whistle sound effects. I'm serious. And not that the Nuclear Man they ended up with was any better. I mean, this film's Nuclear Man kind of looks like he got lost on his way to the He-Man auditions. In fact, they actually wanted Reeve to play Nuclear Man. Well, which would have made sense, because he's supposed to be a clone of Superman. But Reeve declined because, well, evil Superman in the last movie. So Lex gets his genetic stew made and plops it on a nuclear warhead, which Superman throws into the sun, along with the rest of the world's nukes. That explosion causes Nuclear Man to be born. And the way he's born is kind of silly too. Because after the explosion, the little fetus comes out, which is kind of an example of what you can see if you went inside a woman's womb. You can see the baby being created over 9 months. But as far as this movie goes, it takes like 9 seconds. Really silly. So now we cut back to the Clark-Lacey relationship. There were other scenes involving them going out to a nightclub, kind of a date, which was interrupted by the first nuclear man. Unfortunately, you will not find the nightclub scenes in the deleted scenes on the DVD. Well, because the nightclub scenes don't even exist anymore. Even though there are photos of Clark and Lacey at the nightclub, and it was featured prominently in both the film's promotional campaign and in the comic adaptation. In the meantime, the scene with the two that the producers did keep in the movie was the scene with them working out. Primarily because 1, they need to have some comedy in the film, and 2, they wanted to have a little sex appeal, courtesy of Ms. Hemingway in sexy workout clothes. And that's always a good thing, right? Boy, all that yoga must have paid off. I mean, she still looks great. It's also very funny to see Clark get a little payback against one of Lacey's ex-hookups, apparently, who made fun of him earlier in that scene by throwing a heavy barbell on him and saying, "No pain, no gain." And of course, this actually leads to a humorous double date between Lois, Clark, Superman, and Lacey. All this does is provide more comedy that is humorous enough to avoid duplicating the mistakes that Superman 3 made with the slapstick humor and the too many Richard Pryor moments. After all, this movie's already bad enough on its own. But thankfully, Lex Luthor interrupts the goofiness by inviting Superman over to meet Nuclear Man, leading to a really stupid round-the-world brawl that involves the destruction of the Great Wall of China and Superman rebuilding it with his rebuilding vision? The hell? There are also scenes where Nuclear Man caused a tornado in Smallville, as well as an attempt to nuke the Russian government heads with a nuclear missile and serve it into the mix. But like everything else, those 2 scenes were cut from the movie, even though the producers wanted to save the rogue nuke scene for the 5th Superman movie. However, the big fight scene ends in Metropolis, where Nuclear Man steals the Statue of Liberty and threatens to drop it on innocent bystanders. Wow, how very 9/11 of you, movie. But of course, Superman prevents this from happening, but Nuclear Man breaks out his fabulous radioactive manicure and scratches our hero in the back of the neck, and then kicks Superman into space while his cape comes off and lands on top of the Statue of Liberty's torch. I know, I'm rambling on, but there's just so much wrong with this movie, it's not even funny. So anyway, Superman has been defeated by Nuclear Man and is presumed dead by everyone. Lois finds out he's actually homesick with the flu, or what could be cancer, brought on by the radioactive scratch, and also ages Superman rapidly, until he digs out that crystal we saw earlier in the Smallville scenes, which restores him for some more pointless romping and stomping with Nuclear Man, which climaxes on the moon. Boy, that didn't come out right, did it? But actually, the moon fight scene is actually pretty decent, probably the only decent effect shot in the movie. And how Supes defeats Nuclear Man in the end, well, you have to see it to believe it. And yes, it's extremely stupid. And oh yeah, there's one more thing I forgot to mention here. Nuclear Man also has a weakness. While Superman's primary weakness is kryptonite, well, except for Richard Pryor's homemade kryptonite in the last movie, Nuclear Man's kryptonite is total darkness. You put him in a room away from direct contact with sunlight, and he drops dead where he is. Kinda stupid, but yet it makes sense. Nuclear Man is a solar-powered supervillain. Another issue I just gotta bring up here, there's also scenes where people talk in space. At the end of the movie, Nuclear Man kidnaps Lacey, and he's flying with her in space. Lacey's not wearing any protective gear of any kind, and she's fine. You have got to be freaking kidding me. Like I said before, logic. This movie sucks at it. So will Superman triumph in the end? Well, you know the answer to that one. As far as the acting goes, Christopher Reeve gave his all as can be expected, but not even he could save this movie. And I feel really bad for him because Golan and Globus really screwed him over with this movie, both creatively, professionally, and practically everything else under the sun. I kind of liken it to Spider-Man's One More Day, in regards to his deal with the Cannon Group, that'll only come back to Superman if they produce Street Smart. A lot of the story doesn't even make sense, and it was made to end the Cold War, even though another fictional character did a much better job ending it than Superman did. That fictional character's name was Rocky Balboa, and all he did was beat the shit out of a steroid-enhanced Russian boxer. Yes, folks, Rocky Balboa ended the Cold War, and don't let anybody tell you different. So that makes this movie and the purpose of this movie completely null and void. So as far as what happened after this movie, well, we all know what happened to Christopher Reeve, God rest his soul. And like I said earlier, we lost Gene Hackman earlier this year. And last but not least, when Superman tells Lex Luthor that he'll see him in 20 years, he wasn't that far behind. Because this movie was so bad that there will not be another live-action Superman movie for another 19 years. Congratulations, Canon Group. You did the one thing that Lex Luthor, General Zod, and Richard Pryor could not do. You killed Superman. You delivered a movie that is so horrible that no one, not Superman, hell, not even Mariel Hemingway, could save this movie. This movie sucks! So anyway, thanks for watching this review. So yeah, folks, this is my brand new day. A fresh chapter where old dreams and new passions collide. Not to mention I review a very bad movie. And I'm bringing you all along for the ride. And I have one more bit of good news before I go. I'm happy to announce that One Lone Cat Podcast has officially broke 100 overall plays and downloads on Spotify. Thanks so much and keep those plays coming. Stick around, there's more stories to come. In the meantime, thanks for watching and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Also follow me on X at x.com/blackcatloner and on Instagram at instagram.com/blackcatloner1. And you can also follow me on TikTok. That's another thing that developed recently. So you can follow me there at tiktok.com/blackcatloner1 and also at tiktok.com/blackcatclipsfilian. Yes, I have a separate channel for Filian clips. So once again, I'm Blackcatloner, and I will see you next time. Same Black Cat time, same Black Cat channel.